Welcome to the Nevada Trucking Association podcast. I am Paul Enos, CEO of the Nevada Trucking Association. This is today, today is June 1st, 2018, and usually I don't put a date on these, but I just want to have a reference to what I was able to do yesterday. Senator Catherine Cortez Masto held a roundtable up here in Reno to talk about smart cities and how infrastructure and workforce development and transportation and technology all fit into that. It was a great conversation, went for a couple of hours, great people in the room, and these are dialogues that we're going to have more of right here in front of you with folks, academic leaders, business leaders, politicians, regulators, folks that are involved in the industry. So you can hear more about what's going on and how people are seeing the future of not just trucking, but the communities and how it all fits together. Also want to give a thank you to our senior senator, Dean Heller, for signing on to a letter with 30 other senators asking FMCSA to take a look at some flexibility in the hours of service rules. We did have, and this is really a great thing about the Trump administration, about the folks that they have at FMCSA. We've always had a great relationship with our people in Nevada, with Bill Bensmiller, our federal administrator. But at the top, there's always kind of been, not always, but recently, there's been a disconnection. And that is definitely not the case today with Ray Martinez, with Kathy Gautreaux, the deputy administrator. They've actually done some great things in terms of hours of service flexibility, in terms of personal conveyance, in terms of agricultural commodities. We're going to put that on our website so you can go and take a look at those newer rules. But they're designed to make things a little more flexible for our drivers out there. I know that there's a lot of people not happy with the ELD mandate as it stands today, even though if you look across the industry, we've got about 95% compliance on it. But we are seeing more of a willingness on the behalf of the administration to say, okay, where can we, now that we have compliance out there, where can we get some flexibility on hours of service? Where can we, make some of these fixes? Part of that is having the data that is garnered from the ELDs now available. So we're going to be doing our next podcast on hours of service flexibility, have a whole show on that. But today, very fortunate to have a good friend of mine, a good friend of the association here, Jerry Aaron. Jerry is former truck driver, author of 2 books on trucking that focus on trucking in the Silver State, trucking companies. This is Diesel Smoke Over Asphalt Ribbons, Dreams in the Rearview Mirror, and this is Nevada's Teamsters, Truckers, and Truck Stops, a chronicle. And I love these because they're very centered on trucking and Nevada, and these are great books for anybody that's interested in trucking in the Silver State. And in fact, gave a copy of this to both Senator Heller and Secretary Chow when they were here in April. Jerry, how are you today?
I'm fine.
Yeah. Good to see you, my friend.
Well, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
So, Jerry, tell our viewers out there, listeners, a little bit about your history and why you decided to write these books on trucking in the Silver State.
Well, I, as a kid, just always wanted to be a truck driver. And I managed to fulfill my dream and then moved on into management after 15 or so years driving. But I always appreciated the older drivers. Most of the drivers that I learned from, there was no schools to speak of in those days. You had to get somebody that would, trust you to drive their truck, but then you had to get somebody to tell you how to do that. And I learned from mostly veterans from World War II that had either, gone into trucking as far as maybe bought a truck or worked for a company. And so that's how I learned, and I had so much respect for those guys and what they did, for the country, and me as being a young whippersnapper, I guess, in those days, and the help that they gave me and the pointers that they gave me. You had to be humble, because you didn't want to be a smart guy. Because if you did, you may not get the right information from the right guys, you know. But they were the tough guys. They were the guys that drove, you know, before most any kind of fancy
What's the brownie
stuff.
box and
Oh
manual
yeah, all two
transmission
sticks.
and-
Yeah, no air conditioning, no nothing. Even some of them, one of the older guys, hard-tired, chain-driven trucks, you know. And I just was always so impressed by those guys and how hard-working guys they were, you know.
So how did you decide you wanted to be a rider? Is it something that you always wanted to do?
No, not really. I don't know. I just putzed a little bit. I don't really consider myself a writer.
How many books have you written?
3 now.
Oh, well, I've written 0. So, I mean, I think you could consider yourself a writer at this point.
Well, it's like everything in life. You know, you can go to the printer and they'll print you a card. You can be a president or you can be a janitor, whatever you want on your business card, they'll print. If you want to spend the money, you can write a book, you know. But I just wanted to express, I guess, my gratitude to the industry that I spent, you know, over 50 years in, and to the people that helped me, and the real people behind the industry, the guys that are on the road, and you know, there's a lot of books about the manufacturers, Peterbilt, Kenworth, all of those guys, and the big freight companies, Consolidate. You can find stories about those guys, but I wanted to talk about the people, the real people that are out there, you know, that are running a good logbook.
Yeah,
Or a couple of them.
those days are done.
Yeah, right. Now we have electronics.
That's right. You know, Jerry, for me, you know, you talk about mentors that you had in the industry, and for me, somebody who taught me a lot about the trucking industry was Jim Wells, whose family had Wells Cargo. Jim passed away in March, and I remember Jim telling me a story, and the night I found out he passed away, I was trying to rack my brain on the story of his dad and uncle having to load and then unload groceries to get over Donner Pass back in the 30s, and meeting Herbert Hoover. And I was kind of racking my brain to get the details of the story. But those are the kind of stories that you do chronicle in Nevada's Teamsters, truckers, and truck stops. That you know, I was able to kind of go back on and say, thank God this story hasn't been lost. Where, you know, they meet Herbert Hoover, who you know, wanted to see if he had just lost the election, wanted to see if they needed any help. So that was kind of a neat thing, and it ended up getting them into the mining industry. It's amazing how we have a lot of people that start in trucking who are able to diversify and matriculate across different sectors of the economy.
Well, yeah, some of them were good businessmen, and then some of them, you know, kind of stumbled and fumbled. They were hardworking people, majority of them, long hours, and as we know, that was trucking, or still is in some areas anyway. But yeah, there's just a lot of great stories. Some of them are, you know, funny, and some of them are sad. And I experienced a lot of things over the years, different things. I never worked for any of the large companies. I always worked for smaller outfits when I was driving.
Which is really what the industry looks like. I mean, one of the beautiful things about the trucking industry is there isn't a carrier that exists that has over 1% of market share. So, I mean, that's a beautiful thing when you think about trucking. Really is a place where small businesses do thrive. You know, 90% of trucking companies have less than 10 trucks. So, I mean, it's, you know, it is, you know, still an industry where small business prevails.
Well, and yeah, and with those small businesses, you can deal usually with the owner or somebody definitely close to the top if you've got an issue or whatever, and there's a little bit more of a freedom with a small company, I think. You know, of course now with all electronics and stuff, it's a whole different world. Trucking used to be a lot of freedom. I mean, once you rolled out the gate, you were pretty much on your own. There was no cell phones or cameras watching you or anything. You made decisions that, best for the company at the time, naturally, but they would normally back you up, and you would have to find a phone to call in. They couldn't interrupt your trip unless you wanted it to be interrupted. You could kind of leave here and head for LA and disappear for 2 days. Didn't bother them, because if you were a good hand, they knew you knew what to do. If you had an issue, you would call them, and you just made a lot of decisions on your own, and that's what the freedom, I guess, I liked about it. The trust that the company had in you.
Well, and there's still some freedom that exists today. Right before this, we recorded an interview with 2 drivers from UPS, and they did say, hey, we do have that freedom to go out there on the road and listen to whatever music we want as we go down the road.
True.
And kind of have
right.
that nice peaceful experience. Going parts east where I'm from. You've got a lot of great stories in here, Jerry. Is there one that you like to tell our viewers about that is one that kind of sticks in your head?
I don't know if I should tell. This was kind of funny to me. A couple of the older guys that, veterans that were working for a company, we'll just say out of Fernley. Anyway, we were Southern Nevada, and I had a problem with the truck, the alternator generator. That would have been an alternator, I guess. Anyway, this would have been in the late 60s. We were in Beatty, Nevada, and at night, it was probably midnight or so. And so I called dispatch, and they said, well, why don't you get between the trucks and just run with your lights off and just follow the first truck, and then you can make it back to Fernley. Well, that's probably 250, 300 miles anyway. So these 2 older guys, I had a lot of respect for both of them, and they were pretty serious, and they were good hands, both of them, very good drivers. Well, as we left Beatty, we got up, we're getting around Tonopah or so, and so the guy behind me, he turns his lights off. Well, it was a full moon, and in Nevada, when it was clear in those days, the moon was not quite as bright as sunshine, but anyway, it was pretty bright. So then the first guy, I'm sure he looks in the mirror, because we got no communication. There's no CBs. There's none of that sort of stuff. We didn't even have music radios. Anyhow, so the first guy turns his lights out. So now here's 3 trucks running in the dark out there in the moonlight, and I'll bet you we came back probably at least 30 or 40 miles completely in the dark, all 3 of us. Of course, there was no traffic in those days. It was a 2-lane road, and of course, we had sense
still
enough.
Is.
Well, that still is. You're exactly right. We did have sense enough. Even I turned my lights on, when we'd meet a vehicle or something. But you could run out there for that time of night. You could go 20, 30 miles, sometimes not see another vehicle or not meet another vehicle. But I always thought, well, I had so much respect for these guys because they were, the big, and they were just as goofy as I was. It was kind of fun. It was just kind of a kick. Anyway.
Well, Jerry, there's great stories in both these books. How can people, reach out to you, get copies of these if they are interested?
Well, I have a website. You can type in the name of the book, and it'll bring up the website, or you can put my name in there.
What's your website address?
You asked me to see. I'm not
We're going to put that down on the bottom of the screen after
there you
this.
go.
So we'll be set, all right? I'm not going to put you on the spot anymore. Hey, Jerry, thank you very much for coming by. I appreciate this. And these are great books for anybody who has an appreciation for trucking and Nevada history. I learned a lot from this. I was able to get some frame of reference back when my grandpa was a truck driver for PIE, Slim Olson's and some of those different places, Bill and Effie's truck stops. So it kind of runs the gambit. Jerry, thank you very much. And hey, thank you guys. Appreciate you, and thank you guys for watching, listening. We're going to be back next week with more on the Nevada Trucking Association podcast. Safe travels.